A recruiting expert recently said that he would be stunned if Syracuse basketball did not land Kiyan Anthony in its 2025 recruiting class. That means the Orange are going to have a really, really strong 2025 class.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, On3's Joe Tipton on Cuse Sports Talk recently forecasted the Orange's 2025 recruitment class, and the results are promising. We're going to go over the three names that he mentioned, plus maybe one or two more in addition. Then we're going to go over the final lists that Syracuse basketball is on and other names to follow in the 2025 recruiting class. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sport stops sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, of course, we're talking about Syracuse basketball again, even though we are 19 days away from Syracuse football. But we have a recruiting update. And it's regarding Kiyan Anthony and Tyler Jackson and so much more. So we're going to talk about that here on today's podcast. So On3's Joe Tipton, one of the best recruiting experts in the business. He's not usually wrong. He forecasted the three players that Syracuse basketball is likely to get in its 2025 recruiting cycle. Now, let's start off with the one that is already committed, and that is Sadiq White. He is 6'8", 195 pounds. He's a forward from North Carolina and a five-star recruit according to 24/7 Sports' composite rankings. He recently transferred high schools. He is going to IMG Academy for his senior season, which is not uncommon for Syracuse basketball commits, right? Donnie Freeman, Justin Taylor, Quadir Copeland, all recently, or players that have recently spent their senior seasons at IMG Academy. And by all accounts, his commitment seems rock solid. At least that's what Joe Tipton had to say on Cuse Sports Talk a few days ago. So we know that Sadiq White is in the boat, and him alone gives Syracuse a strong recruiting class because he's one of the best players in the country. And with basketball, it's more quality over quantity rather than football where it's you need a lot of quantity. You need a lot of players because football, higher rate of injuries, more players that are playing, etc. You get the idea. All right. So they have Sadiq White in the boat. That's great. Now, here is where the excitement really starts, and that is with Kiyan Anthony. And Joe Tipton recently said that he would be stunned. He would be shocked, according to his sources, if Syracuse basketball did not land Kiyan Anthony. If you recall, he was the expert that released his prediction on the On3 prediction meter that gave Syracuse about a 90% chance of landing Kiyan Anthony, and that was a couple months ago. All right, so according to him, nothing has really changed regarding Kiyan Anthony's commitment. Now, obviously, he has released his final six. Syracuse is in it, along with Florida State, Ohio State, USC, Auburn, and Rutgers. Of course, he's one of the top 30 players in the country now on On3, ranked as high as 29th on the industry rankings over there. So signs look really good with Kiyan Anthony. And he also gave clarification regarding Indiana. Right? Indiana was that team that I think most people were surprised was left out of that final six. Even if he included a final seven, Indiana felt like it would be on that list of teams. They have Mike Woodson, who has a strong relationship and was the head coach for Carmelo Anthony. right? So a lot of people thought that Indiana would be firmly in the mix for Kiyan. Well, it turns out they backed off of Kiyan Anthony. They backed off. They softened their recruitment of him, mainly because, well, they think he's going elsewhere. They don't think he's going to Indiana. And Tipton also mentioned that don't be surprised that even if some of the schools on Kiyan's list back out as well, because they think he's going elsewhere, and that elsewhere is likely Syracuse. Likely Syracuse. So that should really excite you guys that Kiyan Anthony, it seems like, I know we've been speculating it for a long time. It really seems like this is going to happen. Obviously, we're still months away from a commitment, but we're all just in anticipation right now. I can predict it that they're going to land him, but at the same time, I can't 100% say it. But based on what Joe Tipton is saying, that is really good news for Syracuse basketball, and they're likely to have a really strong 2025 recruitment class. Now, the third player that Tipton mentioned to Cuse Sports Talk was Tyler Jackson. This has also been long rumored or recently rumored for like the past month. He is a 6'2" point guard. He's 150 pounds from Maryland. He's ranked as high as the 48th player in the country on 24/7 Sports. So Tipton also is forecasting that he is going to join his best friend, Kiyan Anthony, at Syracuse, which would mean the class would have 3 players: Sadiq White, Kiyan Anthony, and Tyler Jackson. And if you recall, Sam Lance over at Zag's blog, we had him on the podcast a few weeks ago. He was the one who interviewed Tyler Jackson. And Tyler Jackson said that this is something he's talking about with Kiyan Anthony. They're best friends. So, of course, they're going to talk about teaming up. Now, we don't have a final list from Tyler Jackson just yet. But at the same time, I think if they don't land him, fine. There's no guarantee they land him. But I would be genuinely shocked based on everything that is out there that they are not at least on the final list for Tyler Jackson. But that's something to monitor, that there is no final list yet for Tyler Jackson. But overall, Tipton said to Cuse Sports Talk that there are 3 players that are either committed or likely committing to Syracuse basketball. Sadiq White, who is already committed. That's great. A 5-star recruit. Kiyan Anthony. Now, we've been long speculating that, but still really good to hear more reinforcement about it. And then Tyler Jackson. So that duo possibly teaming up once again is gaining more and more traction. Now it's 2 experts that are saying it, not 1, right? Sam Lance said that they might team up. That's great. 1, and I trust Sam Lance. This is not me calling out Sam Lance, but now we've heard it from 2 recruiting experts. Someone else has jumped in, and that's Joe Tipton, one of the best as well. It's great to hear for Syracuse basketball. Now, there's more to what Joe Tipton said to Cuse Sports Talk. There's more. He said that those 3 are likely, and that if you're Syracuse, you're also hoping to land 1 or 2 more players to that class. So I think we can eliminate the possibility of a 6-7 player class. If you recall, they did have a 6-player class back in 2022, but I think we can rule that out. So we're looking at a range of 3 to 5 players in Syracuse basketball's 2025 class. Now, coming up, we're going to talk about some of the other players that Syracuse is on the final list for, which are possible candidates for that 1 to 2 extra spots in Syracuse basketball's 2025 recruitment class. But I'm feeling good. We've already landed Sadiq White. We're predicted to land Kiyan Anthony, and we're predicted to land Tyler Jackson. Now, let's see who Syracuse also still has a shot with. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day. all summer long. And speaking of Syracuse basketball, FanDuel has released the Orange's odds of winning the national championship for next year at plus 12,000. Those are long shot odds, but hey, you'd make a nice profit. And by the way, the players that we're talking about on this list, they cannot impact Syracuse's chances of winning the national championship this year, but maybe for 2025-26, they could certainly impact it there. But anyways, head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On College Football Podcast. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so let's continue the conversation here regarding Syracuse basketball 2025 recruiting. We already have talked about the fact that the Orange are predicted to land 3 players in the class, right? They already have Sadiq White, so that's one, but Tipton is saying Kiyan Anthony and Tyler Jackson are likely as well for the Orange. But he also mentioned that Syracuse can get 1 to 2 more players in the class. So these are the guys who are most likely to fill those voids or that void, whatever it is, 1 to 2 players. And it comes down to 2 separate lists, in my opinion. There's order of preference and there's order of likelihood. Now there's 4 players total for the final list, and I'm going to go over all 4 first, and then I'm going to give you my order of preference and my order of likelihood. These are just my opinions. So the 4 players on the final list. Acaden Lewis. I think some of you guys might know him, right? We've talked about him a bit on the podcast. He's 6'1". He is a guard from Maryland, and he's ranked as high as 34th in the country over on 24/7 Sports. He has Syracuse in his top 8. His top 8 include the Orange, obviously, Duke, UConn, Kentucky, North Carolina, Auburn, Michigan, and Tennessee. And before I keep going with Acaden Lewis, just a side note here, Tipton mentioned that there are 2 factors that really play a role in these kids' commitment. Number 1 is NIL, money. They don't really like to say it, but that's just the reality. It's money. And number 2, it's kind of a quasi between playing time and the path to the NBA. So we have to take into account those 2 factors when deciding who we want and who is most likely to commit. So Acaden Lewis, when we're looking at those 2 factors, right? NIL, when they're competing against those other 7 schools, especially for the fact that Syracuse is probably going to land Kiyan Anthony, which is going to cost some NIL money, and Tyler Jackson, which will cost NIL money, and Sadiq White, which will cost NIL money too, right? Combined with the fact that the 7 other schools are blue bloods or big-time programs, that's not too promising. And also, if we're talking about playing time, this is where I kind of step back a little and I say, look, no matter what school Acaden Lewis is going to, he's going to have to fight for his minutes because his top 8 is loaded. He's got a loaded top 8, all great programs. He's going to have to fight for his minutes. So given what Tipton has said are the 2 main factors in kids' recruitment, and obviously it doesn't apply to every single one of them, put this on the lower end of the probability because remember, we're in line to get 3 players, and there's only so much money you can throw around to guys. Only so much. Let's talk about London Jemison. He is a 6'7", 195-pound forward from Connecticut, ranked as high as 39th in the country over on 24/7 Sports, and Syracuse is in the top 6, along with Alabama, Kansas, Louisville, Vanderbilt, and Virginia. Now, let's talk about the playing time factor. There are 3 forwards that could be on the roster for the 2025-26 season. Chris Bell, Donnie Freeman, and Sadiq White. Now, Jair Davis is out of years of eligibility after this season, so he will not be back with the Orange after this year. So, yeah, they already have 3 projected forwards for the 25-26 season. But if you look a little deeper, you know Sadiq White's going to be there. Donnie Freeman? Probably not, given his pedigree. I'm not suggesting he's going to transfer. I'm just saying he's probably a one-and-done player. Remember, 9 of the last 10 number 6 overall recruits in the country have been one-and-done players. 9 of the past 10. So he's likely not going to be back with Syracuse after this year because he's really good. And he's probably going to go to the NBA. Then there's Chris Bell, who we just don't know in this day and age of the transfer portal. So is he going to be back? Is he not going to be back? I am not entirely sure. But let's say conservatively there are 2 forwards that are back on the roster. There's playing time that's open for London Jemison, which is promising. It's not like the guards and the fact that they're probably going to get Kiyan Anthony and Tyler Jackson, and they still have Elijah Moore on the roster, and J.J. Starling, who knows if he'll be back or not. Right? There's going to be a lot of competition for the guard spots, but for forwards, less so. It's all going to depend on with London Jemison of how hard Syracuse is actually recruiting him. If they're recruiting him really hard, I would say that there's a higher chance they get Jemison over Lewis. But if they've kind of backed off on Jemison, and again, I don't really know for sure, then I would say that Lewis is a higher probability because despite what I said with the playing time and the other schools going after Lewis, they're recruiting Acaden Lewis hard. That is known. We just don't know for sure how hard they're recruiting London Jemison. Next up, let's talk about Ryder Frost. He is 6'6", 200-pound forward from Massachusetts, and he is ranked as high as 99th in the country over on On3, and that's in a recent update, so he just sneaks inside that top 100. And the Orange are also in the top 8 for Ryder Frost, along with Notre Dame, Michigan, BYU, Iowa, Virginia Tech, Wisconsin, and Penn State. He has visited Syracuse recently, and by all accounts, it went well. Now, he's also a wing player, which is cool. We don't know how much, though, at the end of the day, these players are going to command in terms of NIL money. Like, we don't fully know. I would say, just based on his recruiting ranking, and given the other players that Syracuse is in the running for, that he would be on the lower end of how much it would cost to get Ryder Frost aboard. I think he would cost on the lower end, and given the fact that they have Sadiq White, they have Kiyan Anthony, or they're likely to get Kiyan Anthony and Tyler Jackson. Is Syracuse is kind of running out of money in terms of how much they're willing to spend in recruiting? Because you remember, you need to save some from the transfer portal. Then Frost is likely in that regard. Remember, he's a wing player, a forward. There's going to be forward openings. And, well, just based on his ranking, a low-end 4-star recruit, he probably won't cost as much as guys like London Jemison or Acaden Lewis. Finally, we're rounding it off with Derek Dixon, a 6'4" guard from Washington, D.C. He's ranked as high as 56th in the country over on ESPN. And Syracuse is in the top 7 for Mr. Dixon, alongside Arizona, Pittsburgh, Virginia, North Carolina, and Vanderbilt. Given that Syracuse seems to be all over Kiyan Anthony and Tyler Jackson, and that they're recruiting Acaden Lewis really hard, I would say that Dixon, probably not. Probably not. And the latest On3 prediction has Syracuse in 4th for Derek Dixon. So there's still an outside chance, but I would say unlikely. Now, let's get into the lists. We've gone over the 4 players that Syracuse is on the final list for. In terms of order of preference, I would prefer Acaden Lewis the most. He is fast rising, and everyone seems to be all over him. Then I would say London Jemison in second, because Syracuse definitely needs a wing player for 2025-26. Derek Dixon, because, well, he's certainly a backup plan if you don't land Acaden Lewis. And for some reason, if you don't land Kiyan Anthony or Tyler Jackson. And then there's Ryder Frost, and that's not calling Ryder Frost a bad player or anything, but he's the second best wing that they are going after. He is behind London Jemison. And we're looking at the tiebreaker here between him and Dixon. He's lower ranked than Dixon, so I would give the nod to Dixon over Frost. In terms of order of preference, order of likelihood, in terms of most likely to least likely, I would say that the most likely player that they are to get of those four that I mentioned is Ryder Frost. I think the fact that he probably won't cost as much as the other three and that they are already seemingly going to get three in their class, they might not have the money to be able to go out and get another high-end player. So Ryder Frost is number one in terms of order of likelihood. Then 2 and 3 are kind of split. I'm going back and forth, but it's between Acaden Lewis and London Jemison. And number 4, in my opinion, the least likely player that they are to land is Derek Dixon. So overall, if I were to now forecast it, based on what Tipton is saying, the 3 are Sadiq White, Kiyan Anthony, and Tyler Jackson. And then in terms of who's going to fill those final 1 to 2 spots, remember, if you're trying to fill that 1 to 2 more, what Tipton said, probably Ryder Frost is who I'm leaning towards of who's going to be that 4th guy. I think it would be Ryder Frost. And hopefully they can get one of Acaden Lewis, London Jemison, or Derek Dixon. Hopefully they can get one of those 3. But overall, it's really good. If you get the 3 that were already seemingly locks, plus a Ryder Frost, that's a really, really strong recruiting class for Syracuse basketball. Now, coming up, we're going to talk about more names to follow for the Cuse. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Let's go over more names to follow for Syracuse basketball in 2025 recruiting and some guys that unfortunately are no longer in consideration for the Cuse. So these first 2 guys I'm going to mention, they're still in on them, but their status kind of up in the air. Let's start off with Shon Abaev, 6'7", 185-pound forward from Florida. He is ranked as high as the 37th best player in the country over on the On3 industry rankings. Now, he recently sent out a whole list of schools that he's going to officially visit, and Syracuse made the cut. Syracuse made the cut for Shon Abaev regarding official visits. He will be on campus August 30th and August 31st. But like I just said, a ton of schools made that list, and just 3 to mention are Dayton, USC, and Auburn, all around that time for official visits for Shon Abaev. So really, it's one of those things where they're obviously in the hunt for him because they're getting that official visit, which is a big deal. It's a big deal to get someone officially on campus. But at the same time, a lot of other schools are in on his recruitment. And until we get that final list of schools, I would say keep your eye on him, but we just don't really know for sure where Syracuse is going to stand. We have to see how the official visit is going to go, and then how the other schools fare on their visits. And then, are the Orange going to make a final list, or are they not going to make a final list? Is Syracuse going to, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but is someone going to make up their mind and commit to Syracuse between now and August 30th? Would that impact his decision? I would say it's unlikely they're going to get someone within the next couple of weeks. But if it does happen, would that impact his decision process to, commit to Syracuse, right? So just keep your eye on Shon Abaev. Just keep your eye on him. They're getting an official visit, which is good. He's a wing player, which is nice. But just take a step back. Let's just see how the process all plays out with him. Right. I wouldn't put him in the category just yet of the 1 to 2 players that can round out the Syracuse basketball 2025 recruiting class. Next up, Asher Elson, a 6'9" forward center. It depends on what site you go to. Some sites have him at 6'10". He's from New York. He's ranked as high as the 117th best player in the country over on 24/7 Sports' composite rankings. Now, he was offered by Syracuse in mid-April, and since then he has climbed into a 4-star ranking. So that's good. He's trending upwards. But as far as I can tell, as far as what I have researched, I haven't seen a final list for Asher Elson. I haven't seen any official visits or unofficial visits lined up. But I also haven't seen that Syracuse has been ruled out for Asher Elson. So he's a name to monitor in terms of, are we going to get a visit from him? Are we going to get on a final list from him? Is Syracuse really going after Asher Elson? Especially because if you consider him a center, he's now the only center that they're in play for. I'm going to tell you why. Because here are some guys that they're out on. These are players that there's just no more consideration. This one I was bummed about. I'll admittedly be bummed. I'm admittedly bummed that Chris Senack, a 6'10" center from New Orleans, he is ranked as high as 5th overall in the country over on On3, no longer has Syracuse in consideration. He released a top 12. The Orange didn't make the cut. And if you don't make a cut for the top 12, sorry, you really don't have any sort of chance of getting in, especially because of the other programs that were on his top 12. There's a lot of rumors with him going to LSU, and I don't blame him. He's from New Orleans. So it makes a lot of sense. I wish we were in the race for him. He was the best player that Syracuse was still somewhat in the hunt for. I believe the best player that Syracuse offered was Darren Peterson, but that has long been known that the Orange have zero chance for Darren Peterson, and that's okay. You're not going to get every single – you're not going to have interest from every single player that you offer. But Senack was a center. We're going to need a center for 2025-26. Eddie Lampkin, no more years of eligibility. Naheem McLeod, no more years of eligibility. So he would have been that guy who can come in and start right away in all likelihood for this team. But now they're no longer in consideration for him, which means we should probably be going after Asher Elson to at least get some big man, even if it's a developmental project. All right, you can get a big-time center maybe in the portal, or at least a starting caliber center in the portal, and then have Asher Elson in the wings. But no more Chris Senack. And also, no more Dante Allen. He is a 6'3" guard from Florida. He's ranked as high as 64th in the country over on ESPN. He released a top 4. Syracuse did not make the cut. And honestly, it was expected. It was expected they wouldn't make the cut. Not to say that Senack wasn't expected either. There wasn't much with Syracuse and Senack other than the offer. But with Dante Allen, look, Syracuse is going after a ton of guards. They're likely to land Kiyan Anthony. They're likely to land Tyler Jackson as well. They're pursuing Acaden Lewis, right? There's more Derek Dixon as well. So that's a lot of guards that the Orange are in play for. So it makes sense that Dante Allen, they were probably not going to make the list for him. It just seems as though the Orange were recruiting other guards instead of Allen, so they didn't make his top 4. That's okay. Once again, you're not going to land every single player in recruiting. And also, I wanted to mention this name as well, just because, well, it's still somewhat fresh, but it's I think, common knowledge by now. But in case you missed it, Matthew Gilhul released a top 7 about a month ago, and Syracuse did not make the cut. He was someone who visited campus 3 times, but when Jerry McNamara decided to go to Siena as the head coach, the Orange really fell in Matthew Gilhul's recruitment because Jerry McNamara was the lead recruiter for Gilhul. So I thought I had mentioned that. He was a 6'10" center as well, but it's been a long time. So I just wanted to kind of throw Gilhul's name in there as well. There's also guys like Nigel James who committed to, I want to say Marquette, so they're no longer in the race for him. I think Keyshawn Tillery also mentioned a list and Syracuse didn't make it, but those are some other names. But the main 2 were Chris Senack and Dante Allen as recent guys to release a list that Syracuse didn't make the cut. But sorry to end on a sour note, but to kind of end on a more positive note for you guys, Sadiq White is in the boat. Joe Tipton is also saying that Kiyan Anthony, Tyler Jackson, highly likely. So we're looking at least 3 players in the class, and then hopefully the Orange can get 1 to 2 more. Who those 1 to 2 players are, well, anyone's guess. Once again, I think it's Ryder Frost and maybe one of Acaden Lewis or London Jemison. But keep your eye on a couple other guys, right? Like Shon Abaev and Asher Elson. Maybe they creep up in that list as well of possible recruits for the Orange. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On College Football Podcast. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked this video, click that like button. And if you really liked it, subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications so you know right away when I am dropping the next podcast. And folks, tomorrow, unless some sort of breaking news drops regarding basketball, we're going to return to football coverage because at the time of this recording, we're only 19 days away, and tomorrow we're 18 days away from the start of Syracuse football season. I'm so excited. Everyone, take care.